Hello, Ken Robinson, and back again for day 8 of the LEDA Challenge. And in telling my story, I want to share with you one of the greatest lessons I've ever learnt. And that is that it's amazing what you can do, even in the most fearful of circumstances. 9 years ago, I have 4 children, and 9 years ago, my 3-year-old daughter, Victoria, was diagnosed with a brain tumour. I was on a business trip to Melbourne. I was told over the telephone at midnight by a doctor that if at best she had 4 days to live. It was the most horrific experience. It was as though sitting in that hotel room, a truck had just ploughed right through the wall and shattered my life. Those 4 days became 7 days. She went through 8.5 hours of surgery, and they told us to expect at best that she'd be a paraplegic. The doctors actually said to me private that there was a 70% chance that she would not make it. Thankfully, God answered our prayers. Our church supported us, and she came through. And now, at the age of 12, she's preparing to go to the Paralympics. When you're in hospital with a child with cancer, especially the type of cancer my daughter had, you spend many months living in a hospital. It becomes a part of your life. At the same time, our other life was going on. We had our other 3 children at home. We had a business with 11 full-time staff. And as the major salesperson in our business, we were basically living off savings. We weren't able to pay our mortgage for that period of time. And to be honest with you, we didn't really care whether we had $10 in our bank account. All we were concerned with, would our daughter come home? Well, thankfully, she did come home. And I'll never forget the first Monday, we arrived home on the Sunday, I went out to the letterbox. And, I was elated. Finally, we're over this terrible thing. And then I opened a letter from our bank. And banks can be very much to the point. It turns out that we had not paid our mortgage or many bills for many months. And as a result, they expected us to deposit within the next 2 weeks $100,000 into our bank account. Otherwise, they were going to take legal proceedings against us. And as you can imagine, the possibility of losing your home, having just spent 2 months in a hospital, and the ongoing treatment that our daughter was going through, was something that was beyond belief. And so immediately I set about devising a plan, and my sister-in-law and I sat down and we worked out a sales plan for 2 weeks. And we live about 2 hours north of Sydney. And for the following 2 weeks, Monday to Friday, I would get up at 4 a.m. in the morning, I would travel to the train station, and I would travel to Sydney. And there was one area that I chose. It was a group of office blocks where I could actually visit people and sell my program, which is a marketing program worth $10,000. That first day, I got on the phone and I did not put the phone down until I literally had 4 days worth of appointments. And there was no time for lunch. I needed to make as much money as I possibly could. Those appointments started at 8 a.m. and they went through every hour until 6 p.m. I went and did those 2 weeks. Did I feel like doing them? No, I did not. I hadn't even had the time to process the trauma that we'd been through, let alone be in the frame of mind to walk into businesses where I didn't know people from a bar of soap, and within half an hour convince a managing director to sign on the dotted line for $10,000. Fear walked with me every step. Every appointment, I was dreading the thought. Because, you see, I had no alternative. The bank wanted $100,000. They wanted it within 2 weeks. I was in no position to borrow the money. Family could not help me. And even though the pit of my stomach was as sick as you possibly could be, even though I was tired from the months of hospital. I don't know if you've ever been in a cancer ward, and I hope for your sake you never get that experience. But not only do you deal with your child's pain, but you deal with your own trauma. And it is an horrific experience. And then to come home and to be faced with the prospect that if you don't make $100,000 within 2 weeks, you'll lose your family home. It was a nightmare from hell. But you know what? When you're forced into a situation, you have a choice. I could have let fear overrun me. I could have said to myself, this is impossible. I could have easily, having been through two months in hospital with my daughter, I could have just thrown up my hands in the air and said, enough, I can't take any more. But not only would I be letting myself down, but I would be letting my family down. Imagine what it would have been like for my wife and my children and my daughter if within a week of us arriving, several weeks in us arriving home from hospital, we had to sell everything. It was hard enough the following weeks afterwards, and, let me say, treatment continued for over 2 years. But you know what? I believe that there's something inside of us that no matter how bad things get, you can pull up extra strength that you never imagined. The way I learnt that is through going through that awful experience. I hope for you and your family's sake that you never ever have to face cancer. But having faced that, I went and made those appointments. I went and did those sales calls. My day would start at 4 a.m. I would finish my last appointment at 6 p.m. By the time I travelled 2 to 3 hours home in public transport from Sydney to Newcastle, I was getting home around about 11 and midnight. So I was absolutely exhausted. And I kept that up for 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, I'm proud to say not only did I get the $100,000, but I got the $200,000. And one of those people who became a long-term client of mine who I sold to, he said to me months later when I told him what the situation was, he said, I'll never forget your attitude. You were so determined. And he said, you just kept on focusing on how you could help us. And by the end of the presentation, you'd shown us so many ways of how you could help us that we had no choice but to say yes. And so if you've ever faced with cancer, if you're ever faced with the prospect of bankruptcy, let me share this. There is something inside all of us that will enable us to go beyond what we possibly can expect of ourselves. On that note, it's day 8. That's my story. Thanks for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing your stories, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Bye for now.